Stories to tell in the dark. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a new horror movie in which a group of teenagers stumbles upon a haunted house, believed to be the home of a former child murderer, and she would tell stories to these kids, and now all of a sudden one of them steals a book, and new stories are starting to be written about these friends, and this group of friends has to do everything they can to stop it. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, I guess, was based on a book series. I guess the book series was Goosebumps on steroids, I guess that's what you could say. I have no idea. I never even read these books when I was little, but I did my research before going into this movie, and I looked at what some of the illustrations for these books look like, and I could see why these books cause controversy. There are definitely some disturbing images in these books, and I could see how parents and schools would ban these books from their kids and all that. And so if the Goosebumps got a movie adaptation, it was inevitable that something like this was going to get a movie adaptation, and Guillermo del Toro wrote the story for this movie and with a couple other people, and whenever Guillermo del Toro is attached to a project, I'm automatically there. The thing is, though, is he came up with the story. He didn't write the screenplay. So that was one thing I was skeptical about going in. The trailers for this movie made it look really interesting, yet when I found out that this movie was rated PG-13 and not R, that's where I was just like, oh no. This could be a train wreck. Because PG-13 horror just doesn't do it for me. I feel like it's just a cheap way to grab your cash really quick. PG-13 horror movies are just there to appeal to the teenage demographic. It's there because they know that teenagers can actually get into these movies, and they don't have to sneak into R-rated movies, and it's an easier cash grab for the studio. So I was just like, this is probably just going to be a quick cash grab, and at times this movie does feel like it's a cash grab, but overall, the production value for a movie like this, thankfully, for a PG-13 horror movie, is a lot better than one might expect. There's a lot of practical effects in here. Lots of great creature designs that use those practical effects to a T, and they're used very well, and I think that kind of adds to the horror of the actual movie itself. It's the director of The Autopsy of Jane Doe. I'm not even going to say his name. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name. I don't want to botch it out of respect to the director. And if you haven't seen The Autopsy of Jane Doe, that's a good one to watch. It's an underrated horror film. I think I'm going to review it when I do a horror movie marathon in October, so stay tuned for that review. The director here knows how to stage tension. Thankfully, he's working within the same genre that he's been accustomed to working in. So I think that really helps with the staging of the tension in this. There are a couple of scares that actually did get me. For a PG-13 horror movie, they got me. There are your cheap jump scares where it's like somebody gets tapped on the shoulder, or somebody comes into a room and the door opens really quickly, and just oh my god, it's really just there for the teenagers to jump. The teenagers back at me. Oh my god, they were so annoying. Holy shit. I'm never going to a late movie like this ever again because it's just full of a group of teenagers who won't shut the hell up. Seriously, they just kept laughing every time there was a jump scare. Other than that, they were being really obnoxious and provided audio commentary for the entire movie. It's scares like that I don't like, but when the tension is there, when the tension is built, when you actually feel like you could actually be scared, that's when horror movies are really doing their job, and this movie does that in quite a few sequences. There's a scene with a scarecrow, and something happens to somebody, and you're just like, ugh, what the fuck? Yeah, this review is for the teenagers, so I'm not going to complete my cussing in this video, okay? There's also a sequence called The Red Room. I don't think I'm ever going to sleep again after seeing that thing. That thing was frickin' creepy. Oh yeah, see, I said frickin' instead of, the other word. Yeah, because, PG-13. For what it is, for what we get for a PG-13 horror movie, there are some grotesque images in here. There's really some stuff that, as I had just mentioned, that really just kind of made me squeam and squeal a little bit. And it's stuff that I really didn't think they were going to be able to get away with. This is also a movie that took a narrative approach that I didn't expect. It's just a straightforward movie. I really thought that this was going to be something like Trick or Treat. It was going to be like a horror anthology with a bunch of different interconnected stories that somehow come to a head at the end. If you haven't seen Trick or Treat, see that. I gotta review that too. That's what I really thought. I really thought I was getting into like the realm of like something like Trick or Treat or a horror anthology. Literally, the title is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, so that's where I thought we were gonna get a horror anthology, but no, it's kind of a genius way that they do this, that they steal this book from this haunted house, and the stories start to write themselves. They play off these teenagers' fears, and that's really where these deaths come into play. And I think that that was actually kind of smart. It was a really unique way to tell a story. Instead of going the horror anthology route and having all these interconnected stories that really don't seem like they're connected, but they are because they all circle back at the end to be connected. I thought that gave the movie a little bit more energy. The first act of the movie, though, at least the first 20 minutes, I was kind of bored. I was like, we're dealing with high school bullies here. Like, it honestly felt like the first 20 minutes of the movie honestly kind of felt like something that John Carpenter would do back in the 80s, or, you know, one of those early 90s horror movies. And I think it was a callback to that, but it just seemed like it was a little cheap, and the dialogue wasn't as strong as it was later in the movie. The dialogue early in the movie is really, really bad. It is really bad. I'm saying that again. The dialogue is really bad. It gets better as the movie goes on, but the first 20 minutes of the movie are very, very choppy in terms of dialogue, what's happening, and characterization. The main character of this movie is really this girl named Stella, who is, I don't know the actress, but she does a fantastic job. And she's really the only one you really care about. Everybody else is just kind of expendable. Like, there's a little bit you learn about them, and you do care about them, but at the same time, it's just like, yeah, you know you're getting ganked. Like, why do I even have to care? And some of these characters make really stupid decisions. Like, there's one character who is told to be on the lookout and don't get caught, yet he walks down a hallway, walks outside, and he gets caught. I'm like, obviously, like, because this is just a convenience to move the plot forward, and that's kind of my biggest issue with this movie. A lot of this movie feels like conveniences, just to move the story forward. It just feels like that these characters are kind of going through the motions, they're kind of disobeying what they're told, like, oh, stay here, and then they go off and do something else, just to move the plot forward, just to give us a bit of scares, just to give us some tension. And I just feel like that those aspects, when it feels a bit convenient, don't really feel earned. And at times, this movie is a huge exposition dump. I mean a huge exposition dump. There's even like a research scene that every horror movie has to have. Luckily, this takes place in 1968, so there's no Google research scene, but they're in a library, they're researching, they're doing all their research about everything. And so there's a big exposition dump there, there's an exposition dump at the beginning, there's a huge exposition dump in the third act, and at times it gets a little exposition heavy. And the third act of the movie doesn't really make all that much sense when you think about it. There's something that happens to the main lead, and you're thinking something in your head, and all of a sudden something else happens, and boom, everything's fine. It's like, that's it. That's really how this thing gets defeated. I mean, come on. Like, you couldn't do something more creative. The third act does feel a little bit detracted from the first two acts, even though the first act is a bit choppy and takes a little bit to get going. Once it does get going, and once the scares start to happen, the movie becomes really enjoyable. It's just that third act, some exposition dumps, and characterization with dumb decisions, and just expendable characters that you're supposed to care about, but you really don't, just kind of hamper the movie a little bit. But I enjoyed myself with this movie. I thought it was a perfectly fine PG-13 horror movie. It's one of the better PG-13 horror movies. I'm glad I didn't hate this movie, because I was really worried when this movie was rated PG-13 instead of R. I'm going to give Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark a B. I think I'm definitely going to watch this every year on Halloween. It takes place on Halloween. So might as well just watch this every year on Halloween. Guys, thank you for watching my review of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Stay tuned for more reviews coming very soon. You guys are the best. I will leave all my links to my social media accounts in the description below. My name is Alex Madden, and I'll see you at the movies somewhere.